I was asked to speak about on the topic of liturgical development, of historical development of sacrament of matrimony as a liturgical rite, and that's what the perspective from which I would primarily be speaking. You have a handout in which I gave you the outline of the rite as it is today. And I included the texts of 3 prayers of the rite. They are not, in the manuscripts, they do not appear all at the same time. But just for the beginning, I will get into that later. From the beginning, I'll give the outline what the rite looks today. In the books, in liturgical books such as Trebnik or Mikronov Halogion, you would have two services, service of betrothal and service of crowning. They are not as 2 separate rites into modern practice, and historically it has been done together for a long time. So for the betrothal, you would have an opening blessing. You have a great litany with a petition of for those to be married. You have a prayer. Then you have a prayer of inclination. You have the rite of putting on the rings. The prayer for the prayer with accompanying prayer and litany and dismissal. Traditionally, and standard practice of the church. Would be that you would go immediately into the rite of crowning, which is considered the central rite of the marriage liturgy, where you go. You have a procession into the church with the singing of the Psalm 127. Then, in the Slavic practices, in at least as far as I can see from this book, it has certain questions toward the bride and toward the bridegroom and the bride. I will, if I have time, I'll get into that where these questions come from. For now, I'm just dealing with the outline. And then you have opening blessing, great litany, prayer 1, prayer 2, prayer 3, and you have the service of ritual of crowning, service of reading. Our Father, litany, Our Father, blessing of the common cup, drinking from the common cup, and prayer for removal of crowns and dismissal. So when the people looked at this rite early in the 20th century, liturgical scholars did that, patristic scholars did that. For instance, one of the greatest patristic scholars of the 20th century, Father John Meindorf, did a book on marriage in the Orthodox Church, and there this book was very influential, and so some of the ideas which are included there, but he also expresses some ideas concerning the shape of the rite, how the rite came to be. So he says that when we look at this rite, what it mostly resembles is what does it resemble? Blessed is the kingdom in the beginning, service of readings, apostle, epistle, and gospel. Our Father, common cup. What does it resemble? And it obviously, some say that it resembles the divine liturgy. And so also we know that in the during the time of Emperor Leo the Wise, the marriage in the church, this rite was made legally binding for the lawfully contracting a marriage. And so, and Father Meindorf says, for this reason, we will see that one, it was probably some point in the marriage liturgy, where from when we communion the remnant of communion is the common cup, and that the non-Eucharistic rite of marriage, contracting marriage without the liturgy, appeared just at the time of Leo the Wise. And so that's pretty much the idea of when you hear from many people saying that, well, it's obviously that it's common cup is just a remnant of the Eucharistic communion, and it was probably at some point was a liturgy. And however, I mean, when the liturgical scholars started to look at the rite and deal with the text, how they actually appear in the manuscripts, and dealing with the manuscript evidence and comparing the text, just doing the standard work of liturgiology. The picture does not appear as clear and cut as it would seem if we just look at the modern rite today. The thing is that we have to look at the rite in its historical development, and possibly retracing some of the parts of it, how they came into the rite, and sticking strictly to what we have, what appears in the text. What comes to be as a result of these studies is that indeed we did have there used to be a communion as a part of the marriage rite, but then there was never, at least there is no strict manuscript evidence for the fact that this rite was ever a marriage liturgy. That is, where, as we have sometimes a baptismal liturgy is celebrated, where we would have for instance, the rite of baptism replaces the liturgy of the word. Then you have the readings, and then you proceed the Eucharistic liturgy. And there is no strict manuscript evidence, historical evidence that this rite existed. However, the rite was not separated from the Eucharist. There was not. The rite was not. And so, in order to resolve this question, I will go into the history of the rite right now, and then we'll come back to this actual prayers when we get to actual development of how the marriage rite appears in the Orthodox Church. So, in the early Church, the tendency is for the first generation of Christians is to enter into marriage in accordance with the customs prevalent either in Judaism or in late antiquity at that time, excepting customs, of course, prohibited for the Christians. As an example, the animal sacrifices to the pagan gods. I made a footnote, not animal sacrifice at all, but animal sacrifice to the improper gods. Since we have some traditions where it's a footnote. We have traditions where there is an animal sacrifice. In the Armenian tradition, they have an animal sacrifice published in the books of ritual until this day. But that's an aside point. So at the same time, we have evidence that the bishops and presbyters were invited to marriage, and hence the presence of the priest, his prayer and blessing, and performance of certain symbolic actions, and the reception of the Eucharist at the Divine Liturgy was what constituted the Christian marriage. Just to see what was the customs prevalent at the time, of course we have customs in Judaism as they appear in biblical times. We have in Genesis, for instance, Genesis 24, when we have a marriage of Isaac and Rebekah, and we see that those betrothed were already considered